Can I get some of you to turn your cameras on? Hello? I'm going to assume that if you haven't got your camera on, because there's only not that many of us, that you're not here, so. Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Are the rest of your colleagues not here?
I have no idea.
Okay. Come on, more of you. I'm actually only noting down the names of the people who've got their cameras on, so. Here we go. Some of you I genuinely haven't seen before, which is an issue. How's everybody doing? Everybody okay? Okay week? How did people find the readings? By the way, it's just me today, so if you're waiting for Demetra, she's not coming. Is anybody gonna reply? How did people find, did everybody read the readings? Yes, no? Feel free to put it in the chat if you don't want to say it out loud. Did everybody read the readings?
Yes, some of these.
Okay, thank you. Which ones did you read?
Landscape as infrastructure and the wealth of nature.
And how did you find like the writing? Was it?
I don't know if the article landscape as infrastructure, and I want to ask, is there any planning alternative to landscape as an infrastructure approach to redeveloping brown fields?
I think the way in which landscape as infrastructure kind of works very well is that it stands as a kind of overview of kind of the best practice or of redeveloping land that's been presumably formerly brownfield sites, because I guess that's I'm not sure if that's a thing. Sites are designated brownfield in China. and now maybe you can kind of enlighten me on the practices of redeveloping that kind of land in that country.
Okay.
So
I think in China there are not very lots of brownfields because he's now is developing. So a lot of factory are used now. So,
okay. So there isn't that kind of degradation or decay of kind of the urban field in around those factories, around those kind of manufacturing infrastructure. Oh, that's interesting. So so I guess that's why your question is, are there alternatives?
yes.
So let's put that out to the rest of the people in the group. Does anybody know of any alternative ways? Does anybody that's read landscape as infrastructure have come across different ways of redeveloping brownfield sites in cities? And one of you will have. So I'm going to wait until one of you speaks up. Feel free to type it also in the box in the chat if you don't feel comfortable saying it. Yudi Chen, you look like you're about to say something. No? Does anybody want to jump in here? I did say last week that this was meant to be a conversation amongst yourselves that we facilitate and not a conversation that we share. So I'm leaving the floor open to you guys. Or does anybody have anything to say in comment or in an observation to put to Jaizu? Did anybody not understand landscape as infrastructure? Does everybody know what a brownfield site is? Okay, shall I? What would you like me to do here, guys? Because you're obviously not participating in this.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Yeah, hi. I have read some about this, and Some of my opinion is that I think the landscape must be closely connected with the human society. Not only the landscape and nature, yes, all these things should be connected with our human beings and the human society. And I think some of the landscape, such as the parks, the fields, and can be considered as the artificial nature. Yeah, this is my opinion.
And what do you think that association between landscape and humanity, why do you think that is? Why do you think it exists?
I think as the cities developed and not only the buildings or the infrastructures is developing, and the landscape and fields is also developing by the humans and uh, by the architectures, and yes, all these things should be combined and connected with each other, and they will developing together. So I think this is why the landscape it exists.
And do you think that maybe it's because of the fact that before urbanization and before the term of landscape itself, all of humanity and all of the world was landscape before this development,
Uh,
before urbanity? Do you
and
understand what I mean?
do you miss the balance of the landscape and the cities?
No, I'm saying that before cities, all of the world was landscape.
Oh, yeah. I mean.
Does anybody have anything to comment or any observations in light of that? Does anybody have any comments or observation in light of Jai's question earlier? I mean, one of the examples I can think of in terms of like the redeveloping of what's essentially brownfield land is if you look at places like Canary Wharf in London, which was previously kind of old docklands, right? So it's not brownfield like we understand it today, but it is kind of sites with normally heavy infrastructure, heavy kind of manufacturing uses on that. And normally the process includes kind of a decontamination of the land and then a repurposing after that, after the fact. And normally it's quite drastic because the memory of that brownfield land kind of remains, right? So there's also an element of understanding that in order for people to kind of appropriate this land and for it to become better seen, there's a decontamination of the land and then there's a marketing exercise to change it. Another one I can think of is Stratford and the Olympic Village, just north of Canary Wharf, where it's now being changed. It was changed from kind of old miners' towns and all that, and it's now being changed. It got changed into the Olympic lands in 2012, and then now it's being changed into a kind of new cultural hub in the east of London. You know, so it's there are examples of them changing, but it's more kind of after a kind of intensive exercise of kind of marketing the land, if you know what I mean. Does anybody have any examples of how that's happened in your own countries or? I don't know if that helps, Jay.
Yes.
I don't know if that what I said helps in answering your question in any way.
Yeah, I know you say just some, how to say, not only the landscape but also something could mark this place.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I think in Beijing we have also have this, but I now search a picture. Yeah.
So, Sija Wu, would you like to turn on your camera and voice out your question or your comment? Hi, Sija. Okay, so Sija Wu says, these lands can be reserved because they have different industrialization. We can carry out many different designs in this space. Have you got examples of this design that you want to share with the group?
For example, some restaurants and clothing exhibitions now choose such abandoned industrialization space to show their ideas or attracting people to use those kind of places. Yes.
Okay, so the first thing I will say in response to what you said is restaurants, I don't think so, just because the scale at which we're talking about is much larger than that. So industrialization of the kind of purposing of industrial land and industrial infrastructure is the kind of scale that we're talking about is too big to include restaurants. But one of the places that jumps out of me, for example, in the first kind of instance, is somewhere like the Tate Modern in London, which is this big industrial power plant that was repurposed by Herzog and de Meuron in 2000 or 2001. You'll have seen kind of images of it. And this is what we're talking about when we say the kind of integration of this industrial land into the city and going through your example as a cultural kind of infrastructure of the land. Has anybody got any other examples of this or observations they want to share? But also your point brings up an interesting idea of land that whether it should or shouldn't be reserved for these kind of uses. So kind of lately in the kind of last kind of 10, 15 years, we talked about this last week, the rise of like the distribution center, right? And the fact that kind of industrial facilities, like hard industrial facilities, have kind of moved away from the city. And what we have now is like distribution centers for things like Amazon and all these online retailers, right? Which is considered to be kind of light industrial. So one of the things I push back at you as well is some of this land is being reserved in the city. It's just not being reserved for kind of heavy infrastructure with like noise and fumes and nauseous materials, just because of the kind of density that the land gets to and the fact that these kind of urban centers, especially in Europe have like expanded and engulfed these spaces, right? And they keep kind of growing out. So these industrial infrastructure have moved to the outskirts of what's the city now. But there are kind of typologies of people kind of integrating industrial use in the middle of the city. And there's a firm called We Made That did a lot of work around the kind of integration of industrial land in cities, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, if you check them out as well. Any other comments?
Hi, Eva, can you hear me?
Hello, Yudi.
Yep. Actually, I guess some example. There's a mind paint hotel in Shanghai, and it used to be a mind paint, and I was wondering, is it worth the high cost of investment for abandoned land, and is there a possibility of globalizing such cases? Because I think this kind of transformation is more as like a demonstration case to explore the possibility or the direction of potential direction of vista land, but it's not a great reference value for the current vista landscape design, because I think the construction time is much longer than the time to form a new vista land due to vista dumping, because there's so many buildings or landscape are in process. So I think it should be considered for its if it's worthy to do that.
So you're speaking specifically about the repurposing of not so much the land, but the buildings, the building stock that is on that land.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the question you're asking? Does anybody have any comments or want to come back on that in the first instance? I'm going to give you guys a few minutes. Again, the question is it worth redeveloping building stock on existing industrial or brownfield sites? I accidentally left there, sorry. Does anybody have any comments? I'm going to give you 2 more minutes. Again, this isn't supposed to be me teaching you. It's supposed to be you teaching yourselves and you having a conversation between yourselves. So with that in mind, yeah. CJ, do you want to state out what you've written down? Basically, you said, I'll read it out and then you can elaborate. I think it depends on the integrity of this area. If it's seriously abandoned, it can be rebuilt. If the space is not used, there's no need to demolish it. Do you have anything to add to that? Okay. Okay, well, I will address your question, your comment, Edie. I will say that once you associate an economic value to a building, an architecture, suddenly it's no longer a space in a building that fulfills a purpose, right? If you assign economic value to it, then it's no longer about that. It's about the economics and the capital that you gain from this investment that you use to build this building, right? So this isn't a question about the design of architecture, but more about the economics of it. So you say, okay, is it worth it to repurpose these buildings, to refurbish these buildings? I say to you, what is the best way to achieve the goal that the building that you're trying to get is trying to achieve? And once you look at things such as environment and you look at things such as waste, if you can if you can preserve the building and the materials that are already on site, then that's the best way to go. The problem with architecture is, even I find it myself as an architect, you find that a lot of people want to make their own stamp and build their own buildings and effigies, to say that this is my concept in architecture, this is what I believe, look at my design. Once you take ego out of the equation and you say, this isn't about essentially my building, it's about the building that the customers and the client is going to use, then suddenly demolishing a building to then build a new one is no longer the easiest route, if you know what I mean. Because the fact of the matter is, that building that you're demolishing has a primary structure, and the primary structure is the most important thing is the most expensive thing in a building. So to say that it's economically non-viable to demolish it, to refurbish the building instead of demolishing it, is a bit shaky territory. That's my opinion. Does that help?
Yeah, that helps a lot.
Does anybody disagree with me? Let's do that. Does anybody disagree and think that I'm an idiot for saying what I've just said? Wow, you guys are really not talking today. What's happened? Are you guys okay? Have you guys had a tough week? Wowza. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to start going through the questions. Okay? I won't keep you guys too much longer. I'll go through the questions. We can have a light discussion. It will go a lot quicker if someone speaks when I put out the question, but again, that's up to you. So I've got a question from Huang Xiao Yao. Probably murdered that, sorry. Instead of simply pursuing man-made environmental damage, i.e. climate change, actively seeking solutions, we should abandon our criticism of people and move forward to working with other creatures to achieve a balance of the Anthropocene, Capitalocene, Plantocene, Truthocene, making king environmental humanities. Hung Xiao, do you want to further elaborate on your question? Note that I don't even think I've met you, so if you don't turn on. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi.
What do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, we need to, yeah, we should not just simply criticize the man-made environmental damage. We need to find another way to solve it, not just criticize the people. Yeah, I think it's no meaning. Yeah, when we just need to take measures and try to think about how to realize the balance of the nature and the people, and the city and the nature. Yeah.
Does anybody have sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I want to ask how to realize the balance of the nature and the people and the city.
Does anybody have any comments with regard to this? How to balance nature and the cities? Feel free to type it in the chat if you I'm going to give it another 2 minutes. You have 2 minutes to answer this question, guys. Has everybody seen the film The Matrix? It came out in 1999. No. There's a line in the film where the main villain says something along the lines of, well, basically what he's trying to say is that human beings are parasites, right? They consume and take up everything around them. And that's the first thing that kind of comes to mind when you say, how do you achieve harmonious symbiosis between man and nature? Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, for that to happen, there needs to be kind of a respect of nature and an understanding that nature is just as important as man, if you know what I mean. And that means that humankind then no longer develops and develops and develops and develops because there is a respect and a feeling that nature is just as important. But I mean, I don't think anybody has found that question yet. But some of the answers are stop using concrete. Some of the answers are to look after the environment more and making sure that we aren't just wasting resources and building and building and building ad infinitum. And understanding that architecture also is a human right and not just an economic product. C.J. Wu puts down some interesting points, saying it can be considered from three perspectives. So the government, enterprises, and citizens. The government can promulgate some policies, and then enterprises and citizens should be aware of environmental protection or suggest the government to make some changes. I mean, there it's down to like understanding the kind of how do you say, the kind of maneuverings and the possibilities arise when you have democracy, and understanding that one of the biggest kind of obstacles towards economic and ecological prosperity in the same instance is the understanding that regulatory powers are one of the most important things to that. Because through capitalism, well, through kind of economic regimes, the individual, the organization are too small an entity to entice real change at a mass level, right? So it's down to the individuals to, as you say, get the government to promulgate policy. So that's a really good point, CJ. Would you like to talk about any instances, any examples in which you've seen this happen and happen well in the past? You seem to be very versed on this.
Okay, let me think. For example, in Hong Kong, people would like to eat some vegetables. It's organic vegetables. They plant a lot of different kind of plants in their balcony, or use the roof to grow their food, and more and more people to do this stuff, and maybe they will maybe they already have a community, like a big company to provide people to do this stuff, and after that the company is famous. Maybe the government will notice about the people's dwellings, and maybe they want to use some space to like a garden or something, and maybe the government will have some rules to support those kind of actions. Yes.
Huangze Yao, you look like you agree with Sija. Do you want to unmute yourself and elaborate?
Yeah, I agree with her, and yeah, in many countries they have taken measures to achieve the balance of the nature and the human. Like some countries establish some nature reserves to protect the animals and some plants, and some researchers also begin to study new sources of energy to reduce the pollution of the atmosphere. Yeah, that's the humans' effort to protect our environment. Yeah. Hello?
Ru Pang, you look like you were about to say something there. Or someone else. I mean, I don't mind. Does anybody else have examples?
I think government can raise the environmental costs for the company. Like some companies should be required to increase efforts to control environment pollution during their production.
Okay, thank you. Does this kind of highlight the COP conference that's in Glasgow at the moment? Does anybody want to comment on the fact that this week and next week are some of the biggest kind of climate conference in this kind of year? And hopefully there's some real change and real policy change to come out of it in the end, in COP26. I'm going to go back to you, Sija, because I've just read your question. Can reducing the number of people fundamentally reduce the destruction and consumption of the Earth's ecology? If capital is active in facing the issue of protecting the Earth's ecology, will we as architects have less resistance when constructing buildings that are beneficial to the ecological environment? Do you want to elaborate on that, or just let people comment? What do people think?
Hello. Can you hear me? I think because in the history of China, we have some periods that population is very large numbers. So our leader have some rules to control the population. He announced that every family just have one kids at that time. And actually, I think it is an efficient way to control the people to use the resources. And maybe at that time, our country is not developed well, so he used those kind of thoughts to control the consumption of people. So maybe one family just have one kids, they will cost less than before, and maybe the whole society will have more resources for the people. And I think those kind of rules in some extent have some good influence on the economy, but it have a relationship with our country's how to say that? Let me check.
Take your time.
Yes, it's have a relationship with our system, because we are the socialism, but other country is not, and the government can control the economy's trend, but in our country the leader can control the economy's trend and make some decisions on the market. But like in the USA, the leader can't control the economy's trend, so they maybe have some tough period, like the collapse of the bank, and have some has dies like that. So I think maybe it's not can use in the different places, and every country maybe have their own solutions to I don't know, this kind of rules is worked in America, in England. So
So are you saying basically that because of China's ability to kind of control the population, that they have a favorable relationship with consumption and the Earth's ecology?
yes, it's kind of, yeah.
But hasn't the one-child rule hasn't that stopped? And isn't there a general will from the government to have more children? I read something about that. Maybe I'm wrong. I read an article a few weeks ago that said that the one-child rule had finished, and now the government is trying to get people to have more children.
Yeah.
But
yes,
surely has the opposite relationship with the ecology, and surely that's bad for ecology and that's bad for consumption. I'm asking the question. I don't know. So.
Maybe because it's have a connection with economy. Our country have a fast speed on the economy, so maybe the life level is different from the past. So now we have a different problems in our country. Is the old people is too much. Is called let me check. Is called population aging.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, it's a classic thing where you have two people that have one child. Suddenly, the population of that generation is half of the one that's above. So you've got more older people than you've got younger people. But the issue with that, though, is going back to the idea of like ecology and economy, ecology over economy. It becomes then inescapable that the fact that people are having more children, again, through your question, is bad for the ecology, but maybe okay for the economy. But then you have to ask yourself which one is more important, right?
Yes, but I think maybe it's good for economy, but it's not sure it's good for ecology, because if you have more young people, you have more jobs and different kind of industrial, maybe it's boost economy to grow up, but at the same time, maybe more different industrial companies in our country maybe have some just let me think. Maybe we have more chance to ruin the environment, because it's a conflict between the development and nature, but we still have some solutions, like the government will protect a lot of forests, and at the same time we all have a lot of people volunteer to plant the trees for many years, and we also have some ceremony to acknowledgement those peoples, so we can saw it on the television, and we will be effect of those people's thoughts. So maybe it's not bad for us to have more people, because more people can, if more people can protect the environment, maybe have some green thoughts, the life will be different. I mean, so I'm not sure too.
I think that's a question that we're probably not going to get an answer to today or in the next 2 weeks whilst COP26 is on. But thank you for your comment, and thank you for voicing your query. Does anybody else have a comment in that respect on that topic?
Yes, I think reduce the number of people, it can reduce the damage to the economy to a certain extent, but it cannot be fundamentally solved if the government, companies, and the individual do not face the ecology's problems. I think everyone should take responsibility for the ecology. Yes.
I mean, that's an interesting point, you know, because it's then kind of starting to kind of highlight different actors in the problem. So there's governments, there's companies, and there's individuals, right?
Yes.
And all of them have a responsibility, all of them have a mandate to look after the ecology, right? The only problem with that is a classic thing of people saying that people have a real power over the situation, right? So basically, in the 1950s, packaging companies in the US started making disposable things, right? So you have something and then you dispose of them. And they came out with a slogan saying basically stop littering, right? But the meaning of saying stop littering is you're saying that the individual is at fault for the fact that the companies are making disposable objects, right? Which isn't true. The person that's at fault is the company for making disposable things. Should I say that again?
Yes.
Okay. So the company makes things that you throw away in the end, right? And then it starts blaming individuals for throwing away that object. But the fact of the matter is, the person that's at fault is, okay, it's an individual, but really it's the company for making those objects that are thrown away. If you make something that doesn't get thrown away, like what they did before the 50s and what some companies are starting to do now, suddenly you have less things in landfill. You have less things that are being disposed of, right? Okay. So it's the same method now where people are saying everybody needs to recycle. If you don't recycle, the world is going to burn. The fact of the matter is, everybody needs to recycle. That's the truth. But what really needs to happen is those companies need to stop making objects that need to be recycled. And this goes back to the idea of the three actors again, when there's the individual, there's the organization, there's the government, and it is the government's mandate and the government's responsibility to put into law that the organizations don't make those things that harm the ecology. That's the point I'm trying to make. That's my view. And also I'm on the libertarian left, right? So it's a very hard thing for me to say that the government should do it and the individual shouldn't. So yeah. Does anybody have any other comments?
I think you mean that if the big companies produce some products, it can be recycled or reused. Maybe we all throw the last thing. It's
I'm saying that if the company makes things that last longer, then we are wasting less, if you know what I mean, and we are throwing away things less. So it's the company's imperative to make things that are ecologically good because they are making the majority of the things. They are making the majority of the, they're bringing the most pain to the ecology.
Yeah.
That's my stance.
Yes, maybe some products like some plastic products, they can find some materials to replace them, and think about example like those thoughts. It's a video talk about the fast fashion, and some companies change their way to sell the clothes, like the recycle the clothes and rent to people.
Yeah.
Not to throw it away, or for example, in the I'm not sure it's in the Greece have some Amsterdam. I'm not sure, but it's there are a company, and there's a products, the clothes have a very good quality, and at the same time they rose the price up, and those clothes can can wear a long time. You said that it can last longer or something. Yeah. So, but they have their problems, I think.
Of course,
But
because
it's a good way to make people to know that the fast fashion's question. Yes.
I mean, it's the this Friday I was at a talk. Well, I met a guy called, I don't know if you guys know him, but called Christopher Rayburn, who's very much like, his clothes are very much about like recycled and kind of using kind of old fabrics and stuff. And obviously it has its problems, you know, but one of the biggest advantage that it does is the fact that suddenly you are thinking about what you're buying. You know, you're not buying a t-shirt for £1. The t-shirt costs £10, so you're thinking about it and you love it more, you value it more, right? Another kind of example that goes back to what we were talking about before is, you were talking about plastics, right? So you guys are all in Manchester now, right? You've been to the shop, you've seen all the fruit in plastic. Why? Why in the world is it in plastic? We all know what the fruit looks like, yeah, but it's still all this kind of damaging kind of materials that they use in every day. So if the government was to pass a law to say you can't use plastic on your fruit, suddenly there's no packaging industry anymore. Or there's a packaging industry that uses things like paper and things that can be recycled and things that can be reused.
Yes, yes. I saw a film talk about the plastic recycle, and the movie said that some shops, or if you want to pack your food or you drinks, they can provide the paper bags, and it's I think is an efficient way to protect the environment. Like the supermarket will charge if you use a plastic bag, and in my opinion, I not I every time I go to the supermarket, I bring my own bags, the clothes bags, and it's convenient, and is I think is a lot of money if you every time you use plastic bags to put your food or your product, and in the one hand is can save your money, and another hand is reduce plastic bags too. And if all we don't use plastic bags, the company won't produce that. Yeah, so I think maybe it's need our people to work on it, have some awareness of the protect the environment.
But I mean, all of you guys live here now, so you understand that a plastic bag costs like 10p or whatever, right? But if you put the price up, so a plastic bag costs £1,
Yeah.
then suddenly it's not like, oh, it's only 10p. It's like I'm paying £1 for a really, really crap, bad quality plastic bag.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say.
Yes. Or maybe they can raise the price of the bags and no one will use it.
No. Does anybody have any other comments or any? Okay. Okay, so I've got this. The development and expansion of cities will undoubtedly have a certain impact on the environment. The economic development of many cities depends on the demand for local natural environmental resources. How should the planning of these cities change as resources run out? How do we save the cities? Do you want to elaborate on that? Wait, who is that? Oh yeah. That's you, isn't it? Do you want to elaborate on what you meant by that question?
Okay. I think it's a important question because many city now have a situation to change their strategy to development the country and cities, especially that city rely on the environment to development. So if we want to protect the environment, and we must reduce the use of them, and then how do we to to development this country without environment like this?
Does anybody have any comments? I'm going to give you 3 minutes. I mean, it's kind of a similar question to one that Hang Fang Li has said, which is, does urban development contradict environmental perfection? Can we protect or repair the ecological environment while developing the city? Is urbanization the opposite of nature? Does this mean that urbanization will certainly damage nature? The city is part of nature, so will the final form of the city return to the original state, such as the forest and grassland, or continue to become a more advanced city?
I think maybe in the past, the economy and the environment, we also use some ways to ruin the environment to reach our economic goals. But I think maybe nowadays it's not, in some extent, it's not a conflict between those natures and economies, because our country do a lot of things to let people know that the value of the nature, not build a lot of factories. They change the factories into the beautiful countryside, like travel zones. I think everyone like the beautiful nature, and no one can refuse that we ruin this beautiful place to build some factories. And actually, it is efficient because some people live in the city, and there has a very fast lifestyle and a lot of pressures, and they need some space to relax, and they will choose the countryside. And the beautiful countryside and the fast city lifestyle, it can have some connections. For example, you work the whole week, and at the weekend you can go to the protection area to enjoy the views of countryside and experience the life of countryside. The farmers will provide you different experience in the cities, and they charged you, and it's the at the same time you can balance the city and countries, and at the same time the protect areas can have some monies to protect. If it's clear, it's
Yeah. I'm going to kind of pick up on a few points that you made when you spoke. The first one is like about the economy that's basically built on the ecology around the place. Like, for example, that the timber text that you had said this week, that was the whole point of it. That was the point that the white pine around Chicago, they used to kind of chop that up, and because of economies of scale, they made economic gains, which then built the city of Chicago, right? So the moment you start kind of putting down the unit by which you sell nature, then suddenly it's no longer a thing about economies of scale. It's a thing that you have the ability to make a loss on, right? So that was to your point about selling off nature to build the economy.
Yeah.
As your second point, in terms of like having the countryside as a place that kind of city dwellers and urbanites can move to, well, not move to go to on the weekend and on holidays and stuff. I mean, that's an interesting point, but it also overlooks a very key aspect of the natural environment, which is the fact that that they give us the resources to live, right? So like, for example, the water, the food, the vegetables, all that come from the place. So it's kind of more than a tourist attraction, if you will. I don't know if that's the point you were trying to make, but that's the only thing I will say in that respect, because there's a kind of view that nature no longer, or not necessarily, is necessary. And I think that's a very dangerous way to look at nature, because, well, all our resources come from there, you know. So, but in this kind of idea of the separation of nature and the cities, I think we kind of very often look at the urban world as the majority of the world, because we say more than 50% of the Earth's population lives in urban centers and stuff. But the fact of the matter is, the urbanized world is still a very, very small proportion of the area of the planet that we live on. So I would say that it's not really us and them, it's more this is this whole thing that exists, and we sometimes forget how important it is and how much bigger it is in cities. So, yeah. Did I pick up on all the points? I think I did.
Yes, but I will explain that. You say that a lot of people to see the resource of nature. It's not like that. It's like in the countryside, there are some resources we used, and this area is closed. It's not can see, and they just the farmers or the company just show the simple views, and people can walk around or help farmers to pick up their fruits, something like that.
I mean, and there's an aspect or a niche of tourism that is like that, right? Slow tourism, where you can go into the like Tuscan mountains and like pick apples and sow seeds and step on grapes to make wine, and that's a thing that's like quite expensive, and people really love doing that. So yeah, thank you for making that comment.
But I think you are right, because just people go somewhere, that environment will be hurt in different levels, because people will protect the garbage, and if the infrastructure is not good, maybe people will throw the garbage all over the place. And we also know that every science scene also have some visitors to damage it. And I think you are right in this aspect.
Has anybody got any more comments? Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for everybody that participated, and hopefully that was a good kind of introduction into urban kind of ecologies. Next week, I think we start off the presentations, don't we? Is everybody okay with them? You guys know what group you're in. You guys know what text you're reading and presenting. Nods? Nods? Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, send me an email. I think you guys have my email, but if you don't, there you go. Again, thank you very much for today, and yeah, I will see you next Tuesday. See you.